USA, like other Western countries, is founded on liberal principles. The US Declaration of Independence champions life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as the ideals that every citizen has the ability to attain, yet that has not always been the case. America dubs itself the land of the free and the home of the brave. However, this freedom has historically only been enjoyed by the brave at the expense of others. Ethnic minorities have suffered at the heart of this liberal capitalist ideology, which destroyed the native population and fortified slavery and segregation. Thus, Black Lives Matter finds its feet among civil rights activists in a bid to reclaim and confront the humanity of the minority, because all lives will not matter until Black Lives Matter. Alicia Garza, one of the founders, describes the movement as an affirmation of black folks in a world that has silenced them. In the USA, the African American body has culturally and historically been met with violence. This violence is embedded in the US system. It has been normalized, and as a result, it has recently been brought to the forefront of US domestic politics in the form of the constant subjection to excessive physical force and the verbal assault by the police, amongst other law enforcers. The facts, according to Vox statistics, are apparent, and they show that there is a disproportionate amount of blacks killed compared to whites, and that all lives do not seem to matter.
Hold on. Don't touch him, please. The girl came over, gave us a
Six police officers are seen administering an unauthorized chokehold of an unarmed man.
Put your hand behind you.
African Americans have a strained relationship with law enforcement. There exists an inherent distrust from both parties. A tension that most non-minorities do not experience is poignantly expressed in the socio-political thriller Get Out.
That doesn't make any sense.
Here.
No. Fuck that. You don't have to give him your ID because you haven't done anything wrong.
Maybe it's okay. Come on. Anytime there's an incident, we have every right to
That's
ask.
bullshit.
Black Lives Matter proves to be controversial because to many Americans, it seems to be a threat to the structures in place. In 1970s, critical race scholars like Derek Bell argues that race and racial power are represented and deeply constructed within the American culture and legal institutions. Therefore, he challenges the experiences of whites as a normative standard and grounds its conceptual framework in the lives experienced by people of color. This critique of the traditional liberal understanding points out the errors in its approach to race and racism. It stresses on individual power, its constitutional colorblindness, and also its disregard for people of color. Black Lives Matter borrows its essentialist characteristics from this rejection of America's unequal racial dynamics, and as a result is perceived to be threatening.
The opposition movement is threatening. That's the start. Even if it's nonviolent, it's threatening your way of life, it's threatening what you've grown up, what you've been accustomed to. I'm not saying for all Americans, but for many Americans it is.
The media also accounts for the controversial representation and perception of Black Lives Matter. Citizens learn from the news. For example, mainstream media frames Black Lives Matter protest action primarily as feuds with law enforcement. Findings in 2017 confirm that more than any other term, the word police is repeated and associated most with Black Lives Matter by mainstream newspapers. The repeated association between Black Lives Matter and police reinforces the stereotypical connection between black people and criminality. Furthermore, the absence of framing Black Lives Matter in relation to those killed because of police brutality, while consistently associating stories with police, is a refusal to notice or speak about the humanity of the victims. Such neglect of racism and injustice supports the actions of the police, while refusing to recognize the consequences of their actions. Some studies dealing with news and race have specifically examined the concepts of victimization and humanization. Entman in 1992 found that black victims of white crime were less likely to be humanized than white victims of black crime, and that black criminals were more likely than white criminals to be framed as violent and dangerous, and to be portrayed visually in mugshots or handcuffs. The rise of the Make America Great Again rhetoric in the USA also plays a role in current race relations in the US, as in many instances it has normalized many forms of racism. The election of Donald Trump raised a lot of concerns regarding the state of race in America, as his platform appealed to racist elements.
If you keep hanging out with those people and you keep appealing to those people, observers are going to think that you're actually lining up with those people. So I would say he's kind of worrying in that sense, in where he's taken the narrative and the direction and everything.
So any white man in the world says, give me liberty or give me death, the entire white world applauds. When a black man says exactly the same thing, word for word, he is judged a criminal and treated like one, and everything possible is done to make an example of this bad nigger so there won't be any more like him.
Black Lives Matter is only controversial because it is a bold proclamation of a fact that America is not prepared to deal with. The fight for equality isn't over, and that prejudices are very real. It is controversial because somewhere in the American consciousness, blackness and the recognition of it's still threatening. Black lives matter. They should matter, not more than police lives or white lives, but just as much.